As Lee mentioned, we just returned from Milan, where the design world has been coming together in sort of contrast to the world events around us. And when we think about design in Australia, I really do have to turn now to Trent Jansen, because I think that if you have to define what is Australian design within one object or within one person, I think that he's probably the best position to do that. He is working in collaboration with many communities across the country, exhibiting his work and their work around the world. He's developed a form of design which is called design anthropology. And so I'm going to invite Trent to share with you about his work now.
Thanks also to Philip and Lee for the invitation to speak tonight. My name is Trent Jansen. I'm a furniture and object designer and a lecturer at the School of Art and Design at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. I live and work where I am right now in Thirroul on beautiful Dharawal country on the New South Wales south coast, right on the edge of the Five Islands Escarpment, an incredible part of the world. And I want to begin by acknowledging this beautiful place and Dharawal country and Dharawal elders past, present, and those who are still to come. And extend this deep respect to any First Nations people joining us today from Australia and all other parts of the world. Preparing for today's talk, I've been thinking a lot about hope. And as a person who cares really deeply about the well-being of people and the natural world, it can be really easy to be overwhelmed by despair in the current political climate. But I've always found hope in taking action against despair. No matter how futile it may seem, action broadcasts your views. It helps to build communities of like-minded people. And before long, you and your collaborators can build hope together through the momentum that action can drive and hopefully begins to drive. Activism has always been at the heart of my work. Earlier in my career, it was environmental activism that was driving my projects, but recently projects are designed to embody my politics on Australian national identity and Aboriginal social justice. For 15 years now, I've been collaborating with a small group of Indigenous Australian artists, designers and craftspeople from different parts of the country, including Johnny Nagura, Marie Clark, Auntie Vicky West, and Bernadette Hardy. More than collaborators, we've built lasting relationships over those years that really extend beyond the projects that we do together. It's my hope that these relationships are active examples of allyship and truth-telling and working together towards social justice as we learn from one another and produce projects that honor marginal histories and cultural narratives. For me, these projects share the pride I feel knowing that Australia is the birthplace of the oldest living cultures on the planet by telling relational stories that offer a new foundation for a shared cultural identity. I was hoping to share one of these projects with you today. It's called Kurumpukumpu, which is the Pitjantjatjara phrase for strong spirit. It's a project that I worked with Tanya Singer and worked on with Tanya Singer and Errol Evans, who couldn't be here tonight, but I'm going to do my best to convey this project from my point of view. We usually always present this project together, so I'll do my best to kind of share my thoughts on the project as I go. To begin this project, I was invited to Tanya Singer's homelands in Railway Bore in remote South Australia, which is just outside of Indalkina, the very far northern part of South Australia. So I was invited there by Tanya and her partner Errol Evans, and they kind of live and work there for most of the year. So Tanya is a Pitjantjatjara Yankunytjatjara woman from that region. She grew up in Indalkina and has spent her life on that country. Errol, on the other hand, is Jabulgai Western Yalanji man, so he's from far north Queensland. But as I said, he spends most of his year living and working in Railway Bore. We started the project as I think all good projects should start, especially good collaborative projects should start just by really getting to know each other. As I said, I was invited to come to their homelands, which is an incredible privilege. And I spent 2 weeks on that first visit camping in their front yard. and sort of we just hung out and got to know each other. This is Errol introducing me to their craft practice, the wood carvers or punu artists, and this is Errol showing me some of the pity bowls that they carve. I also shared some of my work, and we really just yarned together and got to know each other in a slow way. I think my friend Bernadette Hardy puts it best. She says you should move at the speed of trust. And I think that that's what we did with this project. It took us 3 years to complete this project. So we moved at the speed that it needed to get to know each other well and to do the work properly. I was really privileged to be taken out on country by Tanya, this region that she knows so well, that she's kind of connected with for the span of her life, but also you know, as she kind of has told me on the times that I've been out there, the knowledge that she carries for that place has been passed down by her mother and her grandmother and their mothers and grandmothers, and she's kind of the custodian of so many generations of care and knowledge about this country, and it's incredible to see the connection that she has with that place. She shared with me some ideas and, you know, bush food and amazing to see the connection that she has that has been sort of that has been informed by so many generations of knowledge. And for me to watch this thing that I suppose in Indigenous research is called deep listening, for her to kind of connect with that place with every sense of that she has, her eyes, her ears, her intuition. And the reason I show this image is that it reminds me of this incredible kind of experience that I had there with her, where we were standing together and she pointed off into the distance and she'd seen a hole in the ground. It would have been 20 or 30 meters away. I couldn't see the hole at all. But even from the distance that we were at, she could tell by the shape of that hole that a parenti had gone into the hole and that it hadn't come back out. If it had come back out, the shape of the hole would be different. But because of the shape of that hole, she and her sister Trisha wanted to try and dig for parenti eggs. So we spent like 3 hours digging with a bowl, trying to kind of find these eggs. And by the time we eventually gave up, we were completely submerged underground and did not find parenti eggs that day, unfortunately. Another example, I think, of this connection to place that Tanya has was the kind of the idea that started the project that we worked on. And it's connected to this image of Tanya's that's on screen now, an image of the parakelia flower. The parakelia flower is, from Tanya's telling to me, an important bush food, an important source of moisture when you're out in the desert. And when she was a kid, she remembers the hills being purple at the time of year that I was there with this flower. It was so abundant. But now it's become very rare. We spent 2 days trying to find a patch of this little succulent. And we eventually found one little patch so that Tanya could take some photographs. But it's becoming very rare. And the reason for this is sort of connected in I suppose in every way to ideas of relationality. The connection that this plant, this little succulent has to that region, that ecosystem. It's always thrived in that ecosystem at a particular point in year. But as the ecosystem changes, and Tanya describes it as being the changes that she's noticed as a result of climate change, the ecosystem is getting hotter and drier. And of course, there are larger, more impactful issues that are resulting from those changes. But one of those is that the parakelia flower is becoming less abundant and actually is becoming threatened. This also was a really important flower to her mother. It was her mother's favorite flower. So there's a personal kind of relationality with this plant too. As we spoke more about this, you know, I said in the beginning that my work has over the years been fairly focused on activist work, you know, designing work that can proliferate important stories that are linked to political points of view or in many cases environmental ideas. And Tanya eventually shared with me this beautiful photograph that she'd taken that was her way of sharing the impact that the changing climate is having on that country, or showing me how it's changing. And what we can see and what she described to me was, you know, it's rained just a little bit. The water has penetrated the soil just a few millimeters, And then it's getting so hot and so dry, which has always been the case for that country, but it's getting hotter and drier, so much so that the earth just kind of dries so quickly, almost aggressively, that it cracks and buckles in that dry heat. And this was Tanya's way of kind of explaining this to me, showing me what's happening. And after some time sort of yarning about this issue, we together decided that this might be a nice starting point for a project to design an activist work that could tell this story to audiences that don't know it. We spent the rest of that first trip trying to figure out a way to recreate this really physically beautiful texture, but really conceptually terrifying idea in wood carving. Again, punu is Tanya's medium, so that this seemed like a kind of natural progression. Working in Tanya and Errol's outdoor workshop, which is on the edge of their house, faces onto the kind of scrub and the desert. There's nothing in most directions for thousands of kilometers, but it's an incredibly beautiful place to work. And eventually we came to this texture, which is really at the end of a lot of iteration from all of us kind of experimenting with taking tree branches from just around the yard and carving them in different ways to try and recreate this beautiful faceted cracked earth motif. We worked in a lot of different ways collaboratively. As I said in the beginning, I've been working with lots of different artists collaboratively over the past 15 years, and over those years developing ways to ensure that the practice that we're developing is a co-authored practice, and that the ideas that we're generating together are shared creative ideas. So one of the methods that I actually co-designed or co-developed with Johnny Naguda is one that we together call Sketch Exchange. And it's a very simple idea, but it really allows for co-authorship in a beautiful way. So simply one of us will do a sketch to start the project. We'll hand that to our collaborator, and the collaborator will sort of riff on that first sketch and do their own, and then hand their sketch back to the first person, and they sketch again, riffing on the other person's sketch. And we do this for often many iterations. Sometimes we'll do 20 or 30 iterations, sometimes more. But the point of this is that we're slowly ensuring that we're each driving the creative direction of this project, and that we're each inputting ideas into the direction that the project is taking. And eventually we end up with this idea that is shared, and that we've both kind of inputted into. And we did that here again with Tanya and I sort of worked in this way. We also extended it in this instance to something that I hadn't done before, which we've now come to call 3D modeling exchange. So this is Remy, who was working in my studio at the time, and Tanya. And we would start with just a basic model based on the sketches that we had done, the basic 3D model. And then Tanya would sit down with Remy and she'd sort of direct a whole bunch of changes, change this bit, remove this section, add a piece here. And then I'd sit down and do the same. And then Tanya would sit down and do the same. And again, over many iterations, it's a way of ensuring a co-authorship, a kind of shared creative direction. To make these works that I'll kind of show you some examples of in a minute, we worked with Chris Nicholson, who's an incredibly talented furniture maker. Tanya, Errol, and I are not furniture makers. We do not have a history and practice of making kind of commercially stable furniture that can last through years of rough treatment and travel between different climates and so on. So we engaged Chris, who has a practice of doing this for many years, and he was able to help us realize our vision in a way that could be stable and in artifacts that could last for many years to come, hopefully. This is an image of Tanya and Errol seeing these faceted surfaces coming off the 5-axis CNC for the first time, these things that we designed together, but coming out of this kind of industrial process, which again was needed to make these stable objects. So over this period, we designed a collection of furniture together to begin with. I'll show you some of the pieces now. So this is the Mantapilti low chair. Mantapilti is the Pitjantjatjara phrase for dry sand. Of course, the reference to that drying sand on country. every surface on this chair is faceted in this beautiful way that very clearly references that tree branch that we first worked on together at Railway Bore. Only the sitting surfaces, the seat and the back, are left to be smooth surfaces to contact with your body. Over time, after talking together, Tanya and Errol came to work on my country here, in this part of the world, on the East Coast, back developing connection to place in different ways, meeting each other's families, becoming in some ways part of each other's communities over the space of about 3 years. And over that time, we developed a whole family of things. At one point, we spoke and we decided that we'd like to explore some larger works that would transform these small facets into large kind of swooping sculpts. And we started again to sketch exchange on cabinet tree that could explore these ideas. We spent about incredibly complex, geometrically complex cabinet, and even more time with Chris figuring out ways to produce this thing. So each surface is a curved surface at a different size, interfacing with another curved surface. The joins are all compound curves, and there are, I think there are about 80 panels in this piece that I'm about to show you in a minute, all joining on a compound curve. So the technical kind of complexity of making this work is extreme, and Chris Nicholson is just such a kind of master at this work, and we could not have realized this work without him. So this is the Pitjantjatjara, this is the Pitjantjatjara word for this cabinet is Mantapilti. Again, it's a dry sand, the Mantapilti cabinet. It's about 2 meters tall, a little over a meter in diameter. This sort of monolithic object that catches the light in this beautiful way as it kind of glances across these textured surfaces. It has 2 big doors and this kind of simple interior, because we wanted people to be able to customize the interior to use it for what they might like to use it for. Over time, we expanded this collection into a credenza. This is about 2.5 meters long, about 1.2 meters high. It has a big door at each end, 2 big drawers in the middle. And as part of this particular piece, Tanya was keen to carve some parakelia flowers. She actually carved one herself and then asked her father to carve the other one. And then we had them cast in bronze so that when a person acquires this work, the parakelia flower goes with it, and as a reminder of the story that really drove the project. As part of this project, of course, I was also working with Errol Evans, but on quite a separate idea. When I first went to Railway Bore, Errol, he's told me this in time since. He actually told me this on a stage at Fremantle Arts Centre in front of about 300 people, which was an interesting place to learn it. But he basically told me that he was sus of me when I first came to Railway Bore, and he didn't quite trust me, which of course is totally fine. But he didn't want to work with me at first, and that was totally fine by me. I would never expect someone to work with me who didn't want to. But after a few days, Errol kind of came to me and said, so what are we working on? And a project began between us two, which I was incredibly excited for, because Errol makes these beautiful hand-carved shields. He will fell a tree and take a section of the trunk that he calls a barrel, and then he hollows it out with a chainsaw, and then sort of works incrementally through the tools until eventually he's using sandpaper to beautifully finesse the surfaces. We worked through, again, Sketch Exchange and 3D Modeling Exchange. This is someone from my studio at the time, Melvin Josie, who came out to Railway Bore to help technically on this project. And this is Errol working with him to kind of guide Melvin through that 3D modeling process. Again, these works are made with 5-axis CNC in order to create objects that are stable and that can last, decades, if not longer. So this is an image of Errol seeing this process for the first time, and I remember him remarking on just how much nicer it was to let a machine do it instead of having to kind of carve this thing with a chainsaw. Although I'm sure there's so much that is missing in that process, but again, to create these stable pieces of furniture, it was a process that we needed to go through. So eventually, the piece that Errol and I worked on together is called the Kudichi chair, which is the Pitjantjatjara word for shield. These beautiful sort of matching shields that are combined to make this chair. We riffed on the beautiful idiosyncratic curves that Errol includes in his handmade shields, and also this reference to the shield handle in the back, which is a really beautiful detail, I think. We've had the incredible privilege to show these works 4 times over the last 2 years, twice in Australia and twice internationally. The first show was at Fremantle Arts Centre. Fremantle Arts Centre supported this project from the very beginning. And the amazing First Nations collaborator, Glenn Isika Pilkington, curated this show in such a beautiful way. His vision was that the gallery should look like the desert at dusk, and I think it kind of beautifully creates that feeling. Also, kind of celebrating Tanya's photographs that were really the conceptual underpinning to this work. We also, around this time, showed the work at Melbourne Design Week, at Art Bank. We were really lucky to show the work paired with some works from the Art Bank collection, Indigenous artworks from around Australia that really, I think, sang with our furniture so beautifully. And then just last year in 2024, we were able to get some funding from from Creative Australia, Art South Australia, and Arts Queensland to take this work overseas. And we showed this full collection at London Design Festival at Mint Gallery. Such an amazing thing to be able to do. And then in December, at the end of last year, we showed the work at Design Miami, which was just such an incredible way to kind of finish the run of shows for this project. One of the biggest design events on the calendar. We were able to show this work to some of the most, I guess, influential collectors from around the world, curators from all over the world, and it was so amazing to get some really lovely feedback from those people. So here are some images of that particular space. I think the thing that really resonated most with me about this project, and the 3 years that we worked on it together, designing and making the work, and then the year and a half or so that we've spent exhibiting the work, the thing that really hit me the most was seeing Tanya and Errol be able to share these stories that are so often kind of restricted to remote places. These marginal stories about the way that climate is impacting a remote community in the centre of Australia that, in Sydney, we don't hear about these stories in the mainstream, generally speaking, and definitely not in London and Miami do they hear of these important, marginal and remote stories. But it was really, it was really incredible to be able to see that these guys have stand in front of a crowd in London or stand in front of a group in Miami and tell these remote stories. So this is Errol out front of the gallery in London. He wanted to do a smoking to open the exhibition, and we had no idea whether this would be allowed. So we just didn't ask permission. We sort of thought we'd ask for forgiveness instead. So Errol smoked the opening, and it was such an amazing thing to see on this sort of flash street in London, this smoking ceremony going on in front of a gallery. It was so beautiful to see. And then equally inside the gallery, that was just jam-packed full of people who were there to hear Tanya and Errol speak about this remote, marginal climate change story. And they were there hanging on every word that Tanya had to say about her country. And that was a really beautiful moment for me, and I hope so for her too. But it really hit home to me that we'd built this work that really facilitated this opportunity to tell what would otherwise be a remote story to these audiences that would otherwise not hear these important narratives. Similarly, in Miami, we were invited to speak on the Design Miami talk stage, which is such an honor. And again, we had a packed audience who were there to hear Tanya and Errol speak about this beautiful story, and they'd come to see the work, and then they wanted to hear more. I just wanted to finish by saying that I've got a show coming up in Melbourne. So if you're in Melbourne and you'd like to see some of the other projects that I've worked on over my last 20 years, it's 2 decades that I've been doing work like this and other projects. It's for Melbourne Design Week on the 15th of May. It extends until the 5th of July. It's a Useful Objects Gallery in Collingwood. So please come and say hello if you'd like to. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Trent. That's a pretty amazing journey. So far, I'm really enjoying all the content, Philip. Thank you.
I'm sure everybody else is. And I activated emojis for this session so people can even share love and other emojis. So this is the first time I allowed it. So hopefully it's entertaining people.
I appreciated the floating love hearts.
Yeah. Thank you, Trent. I'm always so blown away by just your perspective and your thesis on design. So thank you. And thank you for
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
So when